answer, but that's okay. That's okay. All right. Perfect. I'm on my phone as well. This is like totally meta I'm checking to make sure that audio goes and audio sounding good on here too. So we're gonna give it just a minute, and then after that gets going, we'll get started. We'll appreciate everyone's patience. Who here is gonna go racing later today, where you can get in a car and ride around? Yeah. I am totally excited about that.
There's a rumor that you're driving the car, Jake. Is that correct?
Yep. Look at that. The audio is perfectly coming through. Perfect. So we're ready to go then. I got confirmation it's working on LinkedIn, and we'll get started. Well, thank you, everyone. So excited for you all to be joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about really a couple things: the breakthrough in quality, workforce productivity, and operations. And we're really going to be focusing on how augmented reality. And if you don't know what augmented reality is, that's okay. We're going to be explaining it to you today. But we're going to be talking about really what that looks like, and how it's impacting the manufacturing and the workforce today. So with me, I guess to start with, I'm Jay Cobb, the manufacturing millennial. If you didn't hear me, I gave a keynote presentation earlier today. We were talking about future technology that's enabling our workforce. And more specifically, what we're going to be talking about today is one of those specific technologies, which is augmented reality. And there's no greater person to be giving this presentation with me than Paul. So Paul, you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Paul Reisner, CEO, founder of LightGuide, and it's great to have you here today. We're going to be talking a little bit about augmented reality in general, just like Jake says, answering questions. Hopefully, we'll have enough time at the end, and expect we would, to be able to answer any questions you've got. But really, learning about how LightGuide and augmented reality in general can really help improve manufacturing quality, productivity, and training efficiency. Really, the three main components of our ROI. And Jake, I don't think we'd ever recognize you if you didn't have a Cubs hat on, by the way.
It's with the brand, it sticks, it works really well, and people could pick me out in a crowd. So that's
you have a Detroit Tigers hat for you if that one ever
I'll stick with this one. Well, let's get things kicked off.
Great. Yeah, so we're really interested in going through a little bit of what we're doing with LightGuide around the world. We are in 36 countries around the world. We've got all kinds of different areas that LightGuide is helping people do valuable work in manufacturing. So if I flip forward to the next slide here, you can see a little bit of, obviously, Jake and I here, and we've done a few of these presentations before, and it really is, cutting edge technology, any form of augmented reality. Really, whether it's a projection-based system like we've got running in the booth downstairs, or another form of augmented reality involving glasses, or even another form that involves tablets. So those are really the three main forms of augmented reality. And if you just think a little bit about the journey that we've been on over manufacturing in the last 20, 30 years, we basically have gone through Industry 1.0 all the way through where we are right now, Industry 4.0. And it's just incredible, to see this intersection of data and people and technologies coming together in a way that has never really been done at this level before. And it truly is exciting times.
Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing in manufacturing right now. For 10 to 15 years ago, was really focused on what's the automation that we can push in that's going to leverage the most automated systems, lights out operations, completely removing the operator from the process. And I think a lot of manufacturers learned from that recently in the last few years. And they're saying, no, we need technology that's going to enable the worker, because the worker is so critical to the process. We need them to be a part of it. And right now, we just needed to keep people, staying with us and working with us, because otherwise they're going to get bored and do something else.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's interesting too, because, manufacturing, despite all of our goals to be able to reduce variation on a manufacturing floor, make it more simple and standardized, in many ways, variation is going up, especially now with so many companies, going toward electrification, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's leaf blowers, whether it's lawnmowers. I mean, more and more of this work now is being done in the same factories as where it used to be the standard, internal combustion engines. And so now many factories are building both EV and electrification parts together with the old style, ICE type of engines. And so there's more variation and there's more risk. So Industry 4.0 technologies can help, if it's applied properly, to really minimize, that risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of those technologies. You can leave it there, is just all those technologies that we saw that listed out in Industry 4.0 is necessarily haven't been brand new technology, but the way it's being used is new in a lot of areas. And we're going to cover some of that today.
Great. A couple of quick quotes. This one's out of Forbes. Obviously, everybody knows who they are, but AR is not only part of the next generation of Industry 4.0, but it is really changing manufacturing technology altogether. And it really is, when you think about the analogy of what GPS has done in our cars over the years. In the old days, we used to have these old maps. I actually happen to have one here, just in case nobody ever, believe it or not, there's some of the younger generation that doesn't even know what one of these things are, right? So these were, at the time, best-in-class work instructions for driving a vehicle from point A to point B. And you pull out your glove compartment, and it usually looked even worse than this, right? And it was outdated, and you had to pull over the side of the road, and you had to, try and figure out where you were. All of that's gone. I can honestly tell you, I don't think I've had a map in my glove compartment, Jake, for probably 20 years now, right? And the GPS just does this tremendous job of replacing paper-based work instructions, what the map is, with truly the right information at the right place, right time. And in many cases, that's exactly what augmented reality can do in manufacturing.
Yep, absolutely. The next quote, by 2025, it is estimated that industrial augmented reality will reach a market value of $70 billion. And that's just an incredible number to think about, how just in a few years, we're seeing how this technology is going to be transforming the industry, and just how much of a tool it's going to be used to push people forward and being more productive.
Proven too. So much of this technology that was just really kind of kicking the tires on it 5-6 years ago is really starting to go mainstream in a lot of different areas. And it's really exciting times, as we mentioned. You want to take this one, Jake?
Yeah. So here's just a couple of things that we look at right now where the statistic, and I apologize if you're watching this online and you can't see it, but the first one is 72% of factory tasks are still performed by humans. And I think it's one of those things where, even though we feel that robots and these automated work cells are just so prevalent in the industry right now. In fact, is the human worker in manufacturing is still the largest workforce out there, and it's still performing the most tasks. It's still doing the most assembly and processes, and we need to build technology that's around that. The other thing as well is that we look at is up here, as the workforce ages, tribal knowledge is disappearing. Digital natives entering the workforce demand new technology, perform their jobs. And I think it's the biggest thing is, as we see this transition, as we talked about earlier today, this transition from the 5 generations that are currently working in manufacturing, and as these millennials and Gen Zs enter the workforce, that knowledge is so valuable that a lot of times manufacturers are just worried about labor leaving, but they don't worry about a lot of times of all the experience that the people who've worked there for 30 years, who could just listen to a machine and tell you what's wrong with it, that can look at a process and look at an error and be able to make decisions on it and act on it right away, that is leaving. And if we don't create a way to capture that information, that's dramatically going to impact more than just losing a hand. It's all the skill that was built on it for many, many years.
And what we're seeing, and it's probably the experience of many people in this room, is that there's some really great applications for robots, especially if it can take, safety to a higher level without having somebody doing something dangerous that can be done by a robot. There's all of those great applications for robots. But where you decide that robots are not a good fit and you need to have people provide a very flexible solution. And by the way, some of the companies that came out of COVID, the most successfully in manufacturing were the ones that were the most flexible. And, people on a workstation or building, things manually provides a really great flexible operation. Much more flexible than hardcore automation like robots in many cases, but you need to have technology that helps to make sure those people are building with the highest quality and productivity in a very flexible way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as we talked about, you're right. These old work instructions, have completely pretty much gone away now. And I'm thankfully that is, the case. I remember driving through Scotland with my family on a vacation here, probably 6 years ago, and we were on the wrong side of the road. And obviously in Scotland they say we were on the right side of the road, but we put about 1,000 miles on over a week and a half, and with GPS did make one wrong turn that I can remember, and I can even imagine what that would have looked like, in the old days. So just a great fit, with GPS taking over those old paper-based maps that you see in the glove compartments.
And I think that's the biggest thing that we look at right now is manufacturing is consistently changing. The processes with what we're doing on a daily task is changing. There was a job I was at where I remember walking, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, but I walked on site and they were just throwing away literally bins and bins and bins of product. And I said, why is all this being scrapped? Well, it turns out when the person came in and set up the job that morning, they didn't set up the job properly because he had old work instructions on how to set up the die. So all the parts that were there were not produced to spec because he was using an old work instruction. And what happened is they thought they went out there, they changed everything. Well, this maintenance guy kept his own work instructions in his toolbox and locked it up every night. And so he was still using old work instructions. That's the same exact example with the map and the GPS, right? When we're out there, we always have an ideal way we're traveling back and forth to work. But once in a while, we're going to hit a roadblock. There's going to be a crash. There's going to be an accident. If you're still using that map, you're never know none of those changes happened. But we're using that GPS, you're getting real-time feedback on what it's looking like. The same thing when we're looking at digital work instructions and augmented reality guidance, we're getting that real-time feedback, which is making us more productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's a rule of thumb out there. It's been out there for many, many years in manufacturing that about 10 to 15% of a company's revenues are tied up in cost of quality type of costs. This would be scrap. This would be rework, inspection, any warranty costs, any of those things that basically are cost factors because something truly wasn't done right the first time. And so to the extent that technologies like augmented reality can help to reduce that cost of, quality, and a lot of that non-value added work that is being done because something wasn't done right, that's going to drop right to the bottom line, in bottom line incremental profits. And it actually gets even worse when you're talking about medical environments, because even over the last 4 to 5 years now, medical errors have been the third leading cause of death after heart disease and cancer. And it's typically just because something was not done correctly in a hospital environment or something like that. So manufacturing, you don't do something right and it can cost you time and money. But when you're talking medical, it can actually cost lives. So there's so many opportunities here to be able to apply technology, to be able to drive quality to a much higher level and, reduce costs and hopefully save lives as well. And we'll dive into augmented reality a little bit in general. So Jake, you want to tee this one up here?
Yeah. So when we view augmented reality, there's a lot of terms that are being used out there. I think one of the biggest terms from the general public is they're thinking of the Quest device that Meta put out, that Facebook put out, that they wear on their head. And that's the one I would say that's most predominantly people think of when they hear of augmented reality. It's a device that they wear on their head. There's all different types of styles. Some are bulky, some are really light. There's a lot of capability between like HoloLenses and stuff. But one of them is a wearable device where you can go out there and you can be guided through operations in tasks, but a lot of times the device itself has limitations because it's programmed around a specifically known environment. And a lot of times it's being communicated back to another hub. So a lot of times if you lose internet connection, you lose communications with that way, there's limitations. The tablet is another one that's around. There's a lot of games out there that kids games have where you can actually download your phone and you could throw a dragon up on your screen and then you can, throw the dragon around your room. And there's a lot of cool stuff out there, but tablet technology is another one that's being used out there in the manufacturing industry for heads-up displays, going out there, pointing at a machine, getting analytical data back of understanding. I'm walking around a floor, I pull up a barcode, that barcode then scans it, and then all of a sudden a bunch of analytics pop up where I can understand productivity, OEE, downtime, what are my latest faults, who's the operator that's currently running it, are they certified or not? So there's a bunch of different technologies, but one of the latest ones, the one that we're going to be talking about today, is projection. And Paul, do you want to dive into projection?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, before I do that, there's what we have found in many, many factories around the world is that there really isn't just one form of augmented reality that's going to be able to apply to any manual process in a factory. There's going to be some applications that are a good fit for a tablet. There's going to be some applications that are a good fit for a wearable. Especially if you're doing remote work, you're out rebuilding a steam turbine out in the environment in a field somewhere application, or you're in a big warehouse and you need to have a complete mobile, type of a system. That might be a good fit actually in that case for a wearable or a tablet. But what we're really talking about with our projection-based technology are those applications where every second counts and every penny counts. And that's a lot of manufacturing operations. And in that environment where every second counts, every penny counts, you really don't want to have to charge batteries, which unfortunately is a disadvantage for both the wearables and tablets, because they do have batteries that need to be charged. And in the case of wearable, usually it's 4 to 5 hours, before the battery needs to be recharged or swapped out. And the other thing is, you don't want to have to we've had many situations where, especially in the middle of COVID, where somebody on second shift doesn't want to wear the same wearable that somebody's been sweating in and coughing in all day on first shift. And so there's hygiene risk. There's even, some of our customers have banned cell phones on their factory floor because of the safety risk. And they've also put wearables into the same category of a safety risk as cell phones, just because of the potential distraction factor. So the projection-based AR advantages are that you can just wear your normal safety glasses. Everything is hardwired to power, so there's no batteries that need to be charged. And all of this is available to see downstairs when you get down onto the booth and see Light Guide. But the other thing is, it's a very secure system, because we're not communicating anything wirelessly. All the proprietary confidential data involved in a manufacturing process stays, all hardwired together into your firewalls and everything else, without proprietary data being communicated wirelessly. So a number of advantages there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And so this is our first video that shows a little bit of Light Guide at work in an actual number of applications. And so this is an EV charge controller assembly. And you can see here, there's still so many manual operations that a robot can't do, such as laying out a wiring harness because of the dexterity involved in that, and then terminating and clicking in all the connectors in the right order. So when you just follow lights, like you see here on the workflow itself, the work just becomes entirely standardized across all 3 shifts. And it actually helps to make sure that the physical twin on a factory floor matches up with a digital twin. And what we mean by that is, many of these processes you see here were designed and simulated in a digital world. And you might have a line that's supposed to be running at a 2-minute takt time, and so you go down the floor, you deploy, your digital model, and you find it's all over the map from a takt time standpoint. When you're following these type of work instructions, you can basically not just standardize the work, but make sure that you're matching up with, the requirements that you've designed into your processes in a digital world. So we've got a wide variety of different applications here, building pumps, building different types of charge controllers. And in the background behind here, there's all the analytics that are being captured. So you don't need a stopwatch anymore to take a time study. You're capturing individual cycle times, and you're also capturing the serial numbers, the torque values, the person that did the work, the time of day. So you really get a digital birth certificate now for every part produced.
And I think one of the things that we're looking at now, as more manufacturers are looking at getting product here made, locally, domestically, they want to understand what is the quality that was put into it, and being able to trace back components or bad parts or faulty things. Well, when you're doing a manual process, a lot of times that's difficult, because there's no automation systems that are preventing you to go from one step to the next step. And you could skip a step possibly within an assembly. But when you're using projected augmented reality that's guiding you through a process, in a combination with a vision system that's actually verifying that the component's there, and it's a check process, you could see a lot of risk that's being reduced that way.
Exactly. 2 big advantages, too, to tag onto what Jake just mentioned, is that it really is the difference between defect prevention and defect detection. So when you've got cameras in manufacturing, which is fine, but they're detecting problems after they've already occurred. So when you get an input from a Cognex camera, Keyence camera, that you put the bolt in the wrong place, you got to spend time and money to go put it into the right place. Light Guide, especially with projection-based AR, can really drive truly error prevention, making sure that the work instructions become so visual, so intuitive, that it doesn't matter whether you've got 1 hour of training or 10 years of training. The goal is, again, similar to GPS, it's going to give you this great combination of right information, right time, right place, so that anybody can do the job, in exactly the right way per your work instructions. Finally, you can also see here, as we're watching these videos, it's really the only technology that provides an inherent layered audit process. And what I mean by that is, as we're watching these videos, if this is our factory, you could see at a glance that the people are doing the work they're supposed to be doing, because the work instructions are visible to everybody. And you can also see who's not doing the work if they're not following the lights. So that layered audit process is also a really big, value proposition of projection-based augmented reality, because at a glance, you can make sure that your team members are doing the work that they're basically supposed to be doing. Great. So if we move on here, this is actually now, when you talk about augmented reality, there are all kinds of different processes that it can seamlessly fit into, such as assembly inspection. We just saw a number of videos there, but also training. It's a great fit for training. Probably about 30% of everything we do is training related. I know that's a big focus of our discussion here today, Jake, but it can really eliminate training variation that you have from different people training the folks on the floor differently. And it also frees up training labor to go do more value-added work as well. And that's a big problem right now with so many factories and manufacturers can't find people, to do the work in the factories, and the people they can find, they can't train them fast enough. So training is a great fit for augmented reality, as well as part kitting and sequencing, maintenance and remote support, distributed manufacturing, which is really interesting, taking a lot of work out of big factories and putting them closer to the end customers through micro factories. So distributed manufacturing really has the potential to drive sustainability by moving work out closer to where the end customer really is. And this would be manufacturing work. And then finally, we also have the ability to put work instructions onto a monitor. But for the most part, we'll always choose projection-based augmented reality as our first choice. Any comments on that, Jake?
No, I think you covered it there.
All right. And as you can see here, we started the company in 2005, and we've got offices in Michigan, as well as in Europe and Asia, and then we're growing very quickly around the world with great partners like Rhino Toolhouse. They're a big successful partner of ours, helping to deploy and sell light guide out onto factory floors around the U.S. And it's been a great long-term relationship with the Rhino Toolhouse team. We just want to touch really quickly, sorry about the flipping here, on a little bit around another work instruction application with training here. And this is really somebody that is being self-trained on a factory floor, literally just by following the lights. And so this is a virtual training station that is deployed down in, actually not too far from here, down in South Carolina. And this is a new employee that's about to go onto the line, and they are being self-trained by Light Guide. So nobody training them, and they're learning, again, the best practices right from the very first cycle they run.
Yeah, I think that's the big time when you look at startup time, when you bring in a new employee on board, and the amount of investment that takes into to put into each employee, especially when the conversations we had earlier on the session was, we're having 20 people join our team every single week as a manufacturer. That's a lot of investment up front. So what can you use from a resource side to train your employees through more of an automated fashion that they're going to find engaging? And, here's a work service projecting light down onto it. A lot of people might not even seen technology like this before, so they're going to be engaged right away. And it's one of those things they're going to understand each process through and through. And a lot of times at a pace that they're understanding, right? As project augmented reality as a pace, it's going to wait for them to have that next step. So if they're not getting something right away, they can make sure they understand what that process looks like. Versus if you're training a bunch of people all at once, you might be missing a few things.
Yeah, exactly. And, so many of the younger generation, the millennials, have grown up playing video games. And so this type of training, especially, is really kind of like the gamification of training and also manufacturing. So it really, fits well, especially with the younger generation, in a way that they've grown up, learning already, as they play video games. So this, just to conclude this video, is really a 3-step training process. Level 1 is what you saw there. Just some original blueprints, videos, getting somebody a little bit up to speed on what they're about to do. And then level 2 here is what he's doing now, is actually getting hands-on with this particular door and learning how to check for wrinkles and other defects on the door. And we're actually measuring the learning curve of somebody in the background. So many of our customers have actually used the same light guide systems for a pre-hiring process, where they might have somebody they're about to extend an offer to, come out to the station and build some parts and see how they do and see if they meet some basic learning requirements. And if they do, they know they're going to be hiring a good employee for their operations. And the very last level 3 part here is a virtual test, asking a bunch of questions that the person just learned about and see if they're answering the questions correctly based on the training. And all of that gets captured against the employee's badge number. But what you don't see is somebody training this person. Those people are building product or solving problems rather than having to shadow somebody. And the other thing is, if I train somebody on how to build a door and Jake trains them, we'll both train them a little bit differently, unfortunately. But when you've got a system like augmented reality, it's really standardizing the training process. Just a couple other videos here. This is a pretty interesting one. This is what we call our auto advance. So this is a bottom of a vehicle. There's about 45 masks that need to be placed on an 80-second tack time by 2 team members. So you can just imagine how difficult this work must have been before Light Guide. A lot of mistakes being made, and now they actually have had examples. In this particular one, where they had somebody with 0 training at all, got placed on this job on a Saturday because the experienced person didn't show up for work. And a person built for 8 hours without going over cycle one time, as well as they didn't make one mistake. So that's really the power of augmented reality. And you can see we can project different colors to correspond to changing over to a different mask type. We're projecting the cycle time countdown, so everybody knows exactly where they are in cycle, because when it gets down to 0, that vehicle needs to move out of station and a new one needs to come in. And then we also are projecting the step-by-step standardized process. Moving on, just a couple results, and this is really where the ROI comes into play. It depends a lot on the level of pain point that somebody's experiencing before augmented reality. But us and even Rhino Toolhouse have got customers where they are really seeing some amazing results. So it's not a technology that what we would say is all show and no go. It really does deliver results, including up to 90% quality improvement, 50% throughput and productivity improvement, in a training effectiveness, that can be 30% or more just in reduced training time. We've got a great selection of customers around the world. Just a really short list here that involves some of the top companies in the world. And all of them are really looking to optimize their operations. And so these are, like I say, we've got a wide range of different customers, and we're very proud of the fact that many of them are publicly putting out testimonials in the form of YouTube videos, articles, just talking about the power of augmented reality to drive real results on their manufacturing floors. That includes Ford actually participating in a big wearable and augmented reality conference, talking about how Ford is realizing some amazing benefits with augmented reality and specifically Light Guide. And then even L3Harris just published an article here a few months ago talking about how they've been running for about 1 year now in a number of applications without making one mistake, which is a bit unheard of for especially manufacturing in general.
And this one's really exciting for me too. So with my day job, where I work, we really focus on helping manufacturers with SCADA, MES, and information-based systems. So what we're able to do is we're able to help manufacturers on that higher level of information. So what we're seeing now is when you take solutions like Light Guide or other companies out there, and you want to be able to do this layer of working with the operator, but you want to understand what is the analytics, how long did that take, why did each part take that long to make, why was there downtime, why did it take so long for materials and resources to get there? When you're working with all these other different companies that are building SCADA, like Ignition or MES solutions, it's really exciting where all this information can now be grouped together, where it's not just about the operator as an individual, it's about the company to truly understand how does each individual manual process come together into a much higher level information-based solution where you can clever analytics.
Yeah, and that data becomes really valuable. It's easy to get data off of robots and other forms of automation, but the manual processes that are occurring in manufacturing floors involving assembly, inspection, part kitting, everything else, that data typically is invisible. And so now with technologies like Light Guide, that does become visible. You can take that data in addition to the quality improvement metrics. But that data now, you can bring it up and see what's happening within your connected factory, and you can even see what's happening in real time in your factories around the world. And that data can come into any form of off-the-shelf analytics packages from Siemens and AWS and other technologies like that, where you can literally do dashboarding on a worldwide basis now to see how your manual and automated processes are performing in real time.
Especially where there's a lot of manufacturers that are doing the same processes but at different locations. Now you can take all of those and really understand what it's like from plant 1, plant 2, plant 3, all coming together, and see where there is variation, where there are similarities.
Yeah, exactly. And the real purpose of this data is not that you can see, what is who you need to go talk to, right? I mean, it's really the best use of this data that we've seen is it gets turned over to the team leaders in a cell. And those folks that are doing the actual work in many ways are the most knowledgeable about the work that they're doing. So this data can get turned over to them, and they can say, gosh, it looked like we were running step number 3 on op 20, 30% over cycle yesterday. What do we can do as a team to go fix that and break that bottleneck? And it's really great to see, teams on the floor kind of rallying around this data and be able to come up with ways to optimize it based on the data. And then this is the actual workstation that you'll be able to see out on the floor downstairs today. This is the what we call Smart AR, which stands for Smart Augmented Reality Workstation. You can also think of it as a smarter workstation if you want to pronounce it that way as well. But it actually is a ergonomic bench, so it can adjust based on somebody's height. We've got the Tesla Model Y battery bay that's down there on the bench today, so you'll be able to see this exact setup. What you're going to see is, primary data that is being projected onto the actual part. That's really the step-by-step work instructions that is the most value to drive quality and productivity. The monitors up here are really secondary information. You can put anything you want on the monitors. So you can put high resolution images, pictures, things like that. You can have another screen that's showing the real-time analytics that's occurring. So you can use these screens to basically display secondary information with the primary information being the step-by-step work instructions projected onto the actual workflow itself. So these are now going out across the world to really standardize work on manual workstations, and you'll be able to get hands-on with it if you haven't already done so down in the exhibit area downstairs. So that's really the whole overview. I know we went through a lot of information there in a short amount of time. Jake, what do you want to add to all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things as we're talking about how do we attract a future workforce, and tying it from earlier's presentation, tying it to all the solutions that are downstairs when you're walking around the expo floor. It's really around how do we better enable our workforce out there. And I think it's one of those things, as nowhere here we talked about, we could take these operators, we can replace them, we don't need to hire more. We still need to hire more people, but this is a way and a tool for manufacturers to leverage technology in a way that's going to keep employees working, keep employees coming back. And at the same time, it's going to make you as a company more productive. So I think it's really checking both marks of the aisle for productivity on the manufacturer side, but workforce enablement on the other side.
Yeah. And it really is a job creation and a job retention tool too. So many processes have been basically lost to automation. And there's also some really interesting statistics around automation and, big automotive OEMs that have invested the most in automation over the years. And it's really interesting data because it shows that some of those automotive OEMs that have implemented the most automation, robots, fixed transfer lines, things like that, are actually some of the least productive, which goes totally counterintuitive to what we normally would think about automation. And what's happening there is in many cases, you may have an assembly line and you've got 5-6 people working on a certain station. You put a robot in and it might replace those 5 or 6 people, and you think you've saved 5 or 6 people worth of headcount. But in reality, if you take a look at all your labor, direct and indirect labor, and you look at the additional labor that has to go into maintaining the robot, programming the robot, et cetera, in many cases, it ends up being a higher cost. And so those companies that have done the best of balancing automation where it's a good fit and people where they're a good fit, many times are running the lower cost per vehicle and the highest productivity, because they really understand, this really smart balancing act between Where do people do the best job? Where does automation do the best job? Rather than I'm just going to put robots in, in a lights out factory environment. And as we saw, that almost bankrupted Tesla when they were trying to launch the Model 3. The whole machine building the machine strategy it didn't work out. And then they ended up, as they put it, firing the robots and starting to put people back in, where the robots were. So they figured out that balance between people and automation and got back on track.
I think Elon's quote was something along the lines of humans are definitely underappreciated when it comes to manufacturing, or something along those lines, where he thought he could just completely automate every task, and turns out humans are still good at some things better than robots.
Yeah. And by the way, GM tried that in the 80s too, and they ended up with robots painting each other rather than the cars, which wasn't too good either. So it's kind of interesting to see that same problem happening from the 80s here recently.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. Right now, I think 12 o'clock is actually when everyone in this room, sorry for those people watching online, but for everyone in this room, lunch is starting at 12. You can head out and actually enjoy lunch over the Motor Speedway and looking at that. But what's really exciting here too is if you have more questions, I actually strongly encourage you to head downstairs afterwards and see the demo live. And I think really getting that hands-on experience is what's really going to allow you to understand how projected augmented reality is really going to impact future workers.
Great. And we got a great team here. Maybe if everybody could raise their hands from the Like Guy team, Amanda, Neil, and Mark. They're happy to answer any questions. I'll be down there this afternoon as well. So look forward to meeting you in the booth.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.